Erev Tov, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of our Kosher Curiosities class. This is our fifth installment of the series that is gaining some popularity and being shared by many people. You can find it on our YouTube channel, previous episodes. Last week, we spoke about Chalav Israel, the source of Chalav Israel, where it comes from. And what about today, the practice today in areas where milk, non-Jewish milk, is being produced and the leniencies with regards to that. Today we are looking at our second part of Chalav Yisrael and with more of a focus on cheeses and butter. These are also two topics that are heavily asked and discussed, and we're going to look at what Peninei Halacha has to say about the isur of gvinat goyim, the prohibition of non-Jewish made cheeses. So without further ado, let's go in and see what he says. And then after each part, of course, we will just recap and know what we need to do today. So he writes as follows: Benosaf leisur chalav nochrim. In addition to the prohibition of non-Jewish milk, asru chachamim gam gvinat goyim. The rabbis also forbade the cheeses of the non-Jews. Hainu shegam im hachalav kasher, even if the milk is kosher. Like, for example, the non-Jew bought the milk from the Jew, or there is no non-kosher animal in the vicinity. The rabbis made a takana that any cheese that this non-Jew made is prohibited to be eaten. There are many reasons why this is the case, as mentioned by the Tanaim and Amoraim of the time of the Talmud. And given that there is no exact reason or the clearest reason, the real purpose why they made this enactment with regard to cheeses is very similar to the other types of enactments that they did with regard to non-Jewish food. To make a separation, to make a difference, to separate the Jewish people and the non-Jewish people. Ulam befal, but in actuality, samchu et gezeratam al chashash isur mesuyam. They did lean and support their gzera on a very specific prohibition, which through that they banned all type of cheeses. And therefore the halacha, or the the final conclusion of why this ban was made and why there is a prohibition against eating non-kosher or cheeses of the non-Jewish that were made by non-Jews, because the non-Jews would always take the kebab, the stomach, the skin of the stomach of a nevela, of a non-kosher animal, to use to an animal that is kosher but is nevela. It was killed. It was not shechted properly in order to make the cheese, and that is what makes non-Jewish made cheese not kosher. Even though, of course, as we will see, you cannot make cheese from any non-kosher animal. It has to be made from a kosher animal, but nevertheless, since the animal was a nevela, which means it was not shechted properly, and the non-Jews are using the skin, the liner, to help make that cheese, that's why the rabbis forbade the consumption of non-Jewish made cheese. In order to make cheese from milk, you have to mix with the milk enzymes, otherwise known as rennet, which separates the milk from all the liquids and sugars, and the whey, and the fats, and then they take the fats and the whey and they combine it, which is the cheese. In a natural state, these enzymes, these rennet, are separated with the through the stomach of mammals, in order to allow them to digest any milk that they suckle much more easier. Hamazon shemitakel bekeba nikra keba. The food that the animals eat that is digested in the stomach is called the keba. Vehiru akeba atzma nikret ora keba, and the lining of the stomach is called ora keba. Yehudim hayu mechinim gvinot ayede keba shel behemot teorot. The Jewish people would, when they make cheese, they would use the stomach of a kosher animal. כלומר, השתמשו בתכולת הקיבה שבה היו מצויים אנזימים אלו כדי לגוון אל החלב. They would use the contents of the stomach liner that had the rennet and these enzymes in order to curdle the cheese from the milk. ואילו הגויים השתמשו גם בפיסות אור הקיבה כדי לקבל את החלב. Now, non-Jews would also use some of these pieces. וכיוון שלא שחטו את הבהמות כהלכה, but like I said earlier, since the non-Jews did not shecht the animals properly, נמצא אור זה אסור באיסור נבלה. This skin, this stomach lining is asur, cannot be eaten because the animal has a status of nevela. And any cheese that came out from there becomes prohibited. Now, if you know, as we're going to get to later on in this series, we know that whenever you have a substance that is asur, or something that's prohibited or non-kosher, and you have 60 times of kosher versus a non-kosher, it nullifies what is non-kosher. That's something that we're going to get to later on. So you would think that in this case there is much more milk than the stomach liner that's being used to to curl the cheese. Nevertheless, since through that is what actually makes the cheese. It's a davar ma'amad and isur nevela batel b'shishim. We do not nullify the non-kosher stomach liner from a nevela by 60 times. Hoid v'ashpa'ato nikret begvina, because its influence is clearly seen in the production of cheeses. It's called davar ma'amad, and a davar ma'amad is not mevatel, is not nullified with 60 times. That is a rule in Shulchan Aruch. B'dorot achronim, over the last generations, tasiyat hamazon hishtachlela, food industry has been perfected. V'kayom mechinim enzimim elu mechaydakim, and the enzymes or the rennet today is usually done through bacterial or vegetarian rennet. Now, there are still places in the world, probably the really good cheeses, such as in Italy or France, that still use animal rennet. כך עושים במקומות פחות מפותחים, וכך עושים גבינות מפותחות שמכינים גבינות מיוחדות בעלות מסורת של דורות. And this is what you find in these countries where they really, really strive to produce top product of cheeses, so on and so forth. But nevertheless, even though most places probably use vegetarian rennet or other type of bacterial rennet to produce a cheese, להלכה נפסק, the halacha is שגם כאשר ידוע בוודאות שהגבינה שהגויים הכינו נעשתה על ידי אנזימים שהם בהם איסור, even if you know for sure 100% that all the enzymes that are used, the rennet that is being used, do not come from a non-kosher animal, מהצומח או מחיידקים, whether it's vegetarian or from bacteria, גבינתם אסורה, the cheeses are still asur. Because when the rabbis made this gzera, it was a complete ban on all cheeses, and nothing is able to override that ban. So while many can argue that you can go into the supermarkets today and see cheeses that are all made with vegetarian rennet and there's no animal products other than the milk, obviously, and you would think, okay, so therefore it's allowed. It must be that it's okay because it's milk. And if I drink and eat non-Chalav Yisrael products, as we spoke about last week, then I can technically buy any cheese anywhere else. We're saying no, you cannot. You cannot, because the rabbis made that ban, and that ban was overwhelmingly accepted. And even if you are 100% sure that it is a vegetarian rennet or bacterial rennet, you cannot purchase any cheese that is made by the non-Jews. נחלקו הפוסקים, האם איסור גבינת גויים חל גם על הנוזל שנותר מהחלב לאחר גיבון הגבינה? The rabbis are at odds whether or not this prohibition also falls on the liquids that are separated from the cheeses. I think that's known as buttermilk. And he brings down over here, there's different machloket, whether or not a person can have buttermilk, whether it's made by a non-Jew. And generally, when you buy buttermilk, you have to make sure it has a kosher hashgacha on it. Moving on to his next section. Let's say the milk belongs to a Jew. But he hired a non-Jew to make cheese. It's a Jewish person's milk, but he hired a non-Jew to make cheese. According to many, as long as you know for sure that there was no mixture coming from outside when making that cheese, the cheese is kosher. Sheken asru chachamim gvinat goyim, because the rabbis only prohibited gvinat goyim, the cheese of a non-Jew. Hainu gvina she'asa hagoy me'achalav shelo, which is what the non-Jew made with his own milk. Velo gvina she'asa mechalav sheyach leIsrael, but not with regards to milk that belonged to a Jew that just a non-Jew made. Ledat rov poskim, according to many poskim, כשם שאם ראה ישראל את הגוי חולה בהמה טהורה, החלב נחלב תחת פיקוחו כשר, since if a Jew saw a non-Jew milk from a kosher cow, the chalav is still kosher because he has that hashgacha, there is that supervision. כך אם ראה ישראל שהגוי מכין גבינה מחלב כשר, ולא לערב באור כבת נבלה, הגבינה כשרה. Same thing here. If the Jew was watching over the non-Jew make the cheese and he ensured that there was nothing coming from a non-kosher source, then the cheese is kasher. V'yesh omrim, so most poskim hold like that. V'yesh omrim, there are some that are more strict. Shegam be'ofen zeh gvina asura. Even in this situation, the cheese is asur. And only if the Jew actually takes part in the creation of the cheese, that's when it will be kosher. Okay, so far what we've covered, you cannot go to a supermarket and buy any cheese, even if the cheese is made by vegetarian rennet or other types of bacteria and not from actual animal parts. Certainly if it's made from animal parts, you cannot. But even if it's not, we're saying you cannot do so. However, according to most poskim, if the Jew owns the milk and is hiring a non-Jew to make the cheese for him, as long as he's watching him, then that cheese is kosher. His next section is an important one. It speaks about gvinot rakot. Gvinot rakot are soft cheeses, and these are everyday cheeses that we see in the supermarket, and they have a different status as we are going to see. The rabbis are at odds also with regards to soft cheeses. Kedugmat gvina levana, for example, cream cheese, cottage, that's cottage cheese, leben, and yogurt. Yogurt is also a soft cheese. Ricotta is also included in soft cheeses. Which is created through natural fermentation. When you put milk in a warm area, naturally, through the bacteria that's in the milk, that milk is going to curdle and it's going to thicken. That's what happens naturally in a warm environment. The first stage, it becomes leben. And then as it goes on, it turns into soft cheeses, like different types of cheeses I mentioned before. In order to speed up the process, they take leftovers of fermented milk or other types of cheeses that may have fermented, which has other bacteria. It's just a process of creating this. In order to speed up the process, more things are added. So he says over here, there are people that allow the gvinot rakot, these soft cheeses, through that are made by goyim. Why is that the case? Why is it that if a non-Jew makes ricotta, or if a non-Jew makes cottage cheese or cream cheese, that it's allowed. Mishum shegzerat gvina hi mipnei hachashash shemamidim ota beorkevat negbera. Because, like we said, the whole reason why the rabbis made the ban was we were worried that the non-Jews are going to use the stomach lining of an animal to create the cheese. וממילא היא חלק רק על הגבינות שמעמידים על ידי אנזימים שנמצאים בקיבה. But that only applies to a cheese that requires a stomach lining, even though nowadays many of them don't use it, like we said, but still only the hard cheeses. אבל גבינות רכות, with regards to soft cheeses, שאינן מומדות על ידי אנזימים מלחיידקים, there's no use for even a stomach lining to make that cheese. מותרות מפני שאינן בכלל לאיסור. They would be allowed because they're not part of the prohibition. They ferment on their own. That there are those that prohibit that. Ulam ledat rov poskim, however, most poskim hold. Gam im neemar shegazru chachamim isur agvinat goyim mechashash shemidu ota b'tzim yisrael kevat nevela. Even though the rabbis made the isur only on a cheese that might in the olden days required the stomach lining. Hagzera chala kol motzrei hachalav shenitavu. The gzera falls on all types of cheeses. Benosaf lekach, even though. And more than that, you have a problem that maybe someone also might have mixed in some non-kosher milk. The fact that we're dealing with soft cheeses is much more difficult to differentiate between a cheese or if any type of non-kosher milk was included in there, since everything is very soft. Okay, so most poskim hold that way, but like we mentioned earlier, there are poskim that allow all types of soft cheeses. So he writes over here of Melamed lahalacha nachon lehachmir. The halacha is really a person should be machmir and kedat rov poskim, according to, like we said, most poskim. And those that want to may. But what we actually see in actuality, yes, gufek sherot bechutz laaretz. There are many kashrut in chutz laaretz shemekilim umanikim hechshel ligvinot rakot shenasot al yedei goyim, that are mekil, are lenient, and allow soft cheeses that are made through non-Jews. Toch hashgacha shehen naasot mechumarim kesherim, through the hashgacha that the materials and the ingredients are made are kosher. Ube'eretz Yisrael, in Israel, noagim kedat rova poskim. In Israel, everyone follows what most poskim write. Shelo leha'anik hechsher legvinot rakot shegoyim. That in Israel they do not give hechshers to any types of soft cheeses that are made by goyim. And this is what we see. You can go to pretty much any supermarket here in North America, Canada, United States, wherever you live, and you can see cream cheeses all kosher, and cottage cheeses all kosher, and ricotta cheeses all kosher, all these other types, lebens, ricotta, yogurts, all have hashgacha on it. That's the reason is because here in North America, we are more lenient to allow the soft cheeses of non-Jews, as long as they contain kosher ingredients, that to be consumed, to be eaten. In Israel, you will not find that. It's not like you can go into an Israeli supermarket and find a no-name brand of cream cheese and cottage cheese, and with a hashgacha, you will not find it, but here you will. So the question I'm always asked is, what happens in a place where there's very little kashrut? What can I rely on? So one of the easy things to rely on would be these soft cheeses. In general, like I said, as long as there's no other crazy ingredients found in the cream cheese or in the cottage cheese that we might not know about, but generally cottage cheese, pure cottage cheese and pure cream cheese is easy to be relied upon as a kosher product. But like I said, already here in North America, almost every cottage cheese, cream cheese, ricotta that you find in the supermarket already has a hashgacha, as we brought down here, because we are lenient to allow the soft cheeses of non-Jews. Now we're going to speak a little bit about chem'a. Chem'a is butter. Chem'a notzet mechalav al yedei peulat chibutz. Butter is prepared through a churning process. Kilomar tiltul hachalav bitnua sivovit. We take the milk and we rotate in a circular motion, which separates the milk from the fatty layer, which we then need to create butter. From already the time of the Geonim, the minhag was split Some people prohibited butter of a non-Jew, and there are those that permitted it. What was the reason of those that said it's not allowed? Again, because of the prohibition of non-Jewish milk. We're worried maybe this person added some pig milk or some donkey milk in there before he actually decided to turn into butter. Even though technically you cannot make butter from non-kosher milk, we're worried that maybe there's some leftover moisture from wherever they were producing their milk from the non-kosher milk that was there, and therefore that's what we're worried about. And even though the probability of that happening is very, very small, we still have the prohibition. Because the rabbis, again, wanted to distance ourselves from all types of non-Jewish food. All right, so this is brought down by the Geonim, reasons why to prohibit butter. Tama matirim, what is the reason to allow butter? Mishum she'isur chalav nochrim en ochal al chema, because the prohibition of non-Jewish milk does not apply to butter. Hoid vechalav tameh eno mitkabesh lechema, because like we said, non-Jewish or non-kosher milk can never be turned into butter. The reason why we disallowed the cheese of a non-Jew, because there was a chance, a possibility that they use stomach lining, because that's the way it used to be. With regards to butter, but with regards to butter, this there is no possibility for it to be made non-kosher from a non-kosher animal. So therefore, there is no prohibition. According to the Rambam, until the liquids evaporate. If you cook the butter until the liquids evaporate, there is no problem whatsoever, according to the Osrim, to those that prohibited. Because even if there was any remnants of non-kosher milk, that would be evaporated, wouldn't exist anymore, and therefore it is allowed. And that is what most poskim write, including the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. However, there are times, misibot shonot, for various reasons, the rabbis prohibited butter. Sometimes non-Jews may have churned the butter and made the butter in utensils that had previously been used for non-kosher foods. So, for example, they might have used previously in that basin some non-kosher milk from a camel, or maybe some pork fat, other prohibited fats, and therefore some people are more concerned. Lemase, with regards to final halacha, as long as you are totally sure that there is no ingredient in the butter that could be prohibited, that is asur, non-kosher, the butter is allowed. Whenever we're dealing with a rabbinical halacha, we are always lean towards leniency. No pun intended. Especially when this is what most poskim hold, like we mentioned, the Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, and Ramah. This is how many of the hashkachot follow, which allow the butters of non-Jew when as long as the ingredients are kasher. Those that want to be extra strict can make sure to buy Jewish butter, or making sure that a Jew is watching over the process, but that is unnecessary. Butter is one of the easiest things you can buy anywhere in the world, especially in developed countries. Here in North America and Canada, it is very, very rare to find real butter, pure butter, without any hashgacha. They already have hashgacha because it's so hard to make butter non-kosher. But again, if you are in a place where there is no hashgachot and there's no OU or whatever place you live in, butter is one of those things where you can rely on, as long as the ingredients are pure milk and nothing added to it. Butter does not need a hashgacha. Okay, the last 2 points I'm just going to speak outside One of them is the halacha that he talks about if a person was to milk a cow on Shabbat. So chaliba b'Shabbat asura me'atorah. A person is not allowed to milk a cow on Shabbat. However, we have another issue here because if you don't milk a cow on Shabbat and then the cow is in pain, needs to be milked. So he says, in order to prevent pain from the cow, they're going to be in lots of pain. A person is allowed to ask a non-Jew to go and milk a cow, even though normally you wouldn't be allowed to ask a non-Jew to do a melacha for you on Shabbat. In this case, because there is tsar ba'alei chayim, pain to the animal, we are allowing the goy to go and milk the cow for you, and you can even ask him to go and milk the cow for you. And the last point we'll conclude it is he writes about chalav isha. This is the milk of a woman from a woman's breast. He writes here chalav isha, the breast milk, ben Yehudiya, ben shena Yehudiya, whether it's from a Jewish woman or a non-Jewish woman, mutar b'achila, is allowed to be drunk. Ubitnai shachalav parash mimena, on condition that the milk has already been separated from her, which means that the woman has excreted the milk from her breast into a kli, into a vessel. And as well, that milk that comes from a woman is not milk that can prohibit, that makes a basar bechalav mixture, a meat and milk mixture. So meaning if you have a woman's breast milk that falls into meat, you don't have to worry about that. It's only cow's milk. Nevertheless, the rabbis still prohibited us from nursing from a grown woman. And the only people that are allowed, of course, are children, either from his mom or from a nursemaid, until they reach the age of 24 months. After they reach this age, if the baby just continues nursing, then up to age 4, that is a maximum where a child can nurse. And if he's really, really weak, then maybe even up to the age of 5. But once a child reaches the age of 2, and he goes 3 days without suckling from his mother's breast, and that 3-day pause was not because he was sick. At that point, it becomes forbidden for you, for any mother or nursemaid, to nurse this child, because his deen, his law, is now like an adult. Which means that a man and woman can drink breast milk as long as it is separated from the mother's breast or the woman's breast, but not from the actual breast itself. Okay, so this concludes our Kosher Curiosities class number 5. Join us next week, Bezrat Hashem, for a new topic. Stay tuned. Wishing everyone a wonderful night. Be well.